70% of that news coverage suggested that Muslims or Islam presents a threat to what we would suggest is our way of life, or our values, or our culture. I don't think that we can get away from the fact that there is that sense of mistrust, that sense of misunderstanding, and that sense of suspicion that at least perceptually we actually see as being something that does exist between some communities.
I think, Mike, you have a question?
I'm Mike Hardy. I lead the British Council's work in intercultural dialogue. How do we move on in this journey? How do we encourage the debate to focus upon the many positives that you've referred to already?
Petra, would you like to ask a question, please?
My name is Petra Stienen. I'm a former diplomat for the Netherlands, and I've lived and worked in the Arab world for more than 11 years. And I'm always touched by all these men in Europe who are so concerned about women's rights in the Islamic world. I wish they had the same passion for women's rights in the Netherlands and other parts of Europe, so thank you for your passion. And so I will ask, I'm very willing to fight for rights of women who want to wear the headscarf, but do you want to fight for my right to wear a miniskirt? Thank you.
Gideon, you have a question?
Hi, my name is Gideon van Emden. I work for Sajjad, a Jewish contribution to an inclusive Europe. Within the Muslim community, we see a lot of anti-Semitism, we do see sexism, and we do see homophobia and other issues of social cohesion. My question to the panel is, how do we address those? How do we get past those obstacles and indeed move forward?
We'll move on. Daniel, would you like to come in on some of the issues that our questioners have asked?
I have never heard Douglas speak before. I have not even read anything what he have written. So it's the first time, well, I have read worse people than him, you know. So I would like to correct him factually two things, because when I hear him, I am really amazed that he's so ignorant of what is happening among Muslim communities and even what is happening in Britain. Let me give an example. He says, Islam has many confused ideas, as has Europe. Now, a man of his stature is comparing a religion with a continent. You can't do that. Let me finish. If you want to compare, let's compare Islam with Christianity, what Christianity has done in history and what Islam has done. Then I would like to have a comparison. Then you said that Islamophobia is a bogus term. I agree with you, because it's not Islamophobia, it is hatred against Islam. Douglas, you should know that Islamophobia is our hatred against Islam is not a new phenomenon. It started right after the inception of Islam, where the popes and the clergy and the whole historical narrative, if you see, it is anti-Islamic. And it has nothing to do with homosexuality, it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Now, I will come back to Gideon, because he always reminds me of these two things, about anti-Semitism in Islam and homosexuality. It's amazing, Gideon, that you never even bother to read the rest of Islam, what Islam talks about. Now, I can tell you, in my own country, in Denmark, the most crimes against homosexuals are committed by the Christian Europeans, or the Christian Danes, not by the Muslims. And we, as people who call ourselves Muslims, we say there is no compulsion in religion. Anybody can change religion if they want. So I don't understand that you take an example of a couple of examples and talk about anti-Semitism in Islam. Hitler was not Muslim. Mussolini was not Muslim. And what happened in European history against Jews? Actually, Jews should thank the Muslims who protected them all the time, every time they were being prosecuted. So I think we should be very careful when we start taking individual examples and put it on Islam, because there's a big difference between Islam as a religion and people who practice it. And you can blame the people who practice it. I also blame them. But don't blame the religion as such. Thank you.
Chris, would you like to come in?
I'd just like to respond to a few points, and I think that the issue of being offended. I mean, I think that we should all, as citizens of Europe or as citizens of Britain or wherever, we should have the right to offend and also the right to be offended as well. And I don't think that being offended is actually Islamophobic. So yes, there are Muslims in Britain and across Europe and across the world, in fact, that are overtly homophobic. But then again, in Britain we have a a number of Christians who are homophobic. We have a number of people that are not from any particular religion as well that are homophobic as well. And in the same way, we have people from that are not in the religion of Islam, and people that have no religion whatsoever who are also Islamophobic as well. And I think that one of the problems we have is that sometimes we don't begin to separate out the phenomena from the actual community, or the phenomena from the people that are actually the victims as well.
Bashy, please, floor's yours.
I do not believe in assimilation. Look, I am from the first generation, what you call. I came to Europe. At that time, we never talked about Islam or Prophet and what Quran said. Europe were busy giving broom in our hands so that we start cleaning and wash their windows. And that is what was happening. Today, the young people are demanding their rights. And when they are demanding their rights, some people in majority society don't want to give them rights. So it's a question of citizenship, it's a question of equal right, but most important, equal treatment under the law. Equal rights, equal opportunities, but very importantly, also equal responsibilities, that they live up to the responsibility in the society they live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bashy. I think the fact that the importance of building an inclusive society, I think that really is a leadership problem. And I do find that it's not just the extremist left and the extremist right, that is pushing an agenda which is exclusive and discriminatory and fragmented. So having said that, I'd like to turn the floor now to Daniel. Daniel.
It's always been central to my understanding of a free society that you can be a full participant in that society without anyone objecting to the way you eat or dress or pray or the names that you give your children. But there are some things that are non-negotiable. And those non-negotiable things are the acceptance of the rules of parliamentary democracy, including the supremacy in the final event of the legal apparatus of the state rather than of an external clerical pretension, including the basic freedom and dignity of your fellow citizens of both sexes, including free speech, including the right to give offence and the right peaceably to register the fact of your offence, including the idea that there is no superior claim to the democratic will of the majority expressed through the ballot box. Now, if you call that integration rather than assimilation, then I think we agree about it.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So, Douglas, you've heard a number of comments here over the last 2 hours or so. Have you mellowed a bit? Has it changed any of your ideas?
I don't quite know why it's me that has to mellow. I mean that perfectly frankly. I don't see why I should drop my hatred of and disdain for bigoted and racist viewpoints that come from Islam. And nothing that's happened today will change that contempt or that hatred for that kind of bigotry. Bashy said that he didn't know of my work, and I can certainly return the compliment. But he did say that he was not sure why I wasn't talking about Christianity and Islam, and it is, I can simply say, because it's not the title of what we're meant to be discussing today. The title is Europe and Islam, and that's what I've tried to approach. I do think there's one thing that you said, Bashy, which is important to take up on, which I thought was deeply disingenuous. Your quoting of the Quran, the Quranic verse about there being no compulsion in religion. You do know how that verse goes on. Yes. Would you like to quote it to the people present?
First of all, in all religious scriptures...
I'm just
let me finish. I'm just saying to you, because I'm answering to you, because you're taking just one surah out of context.
Well, you quoted
no.
Okay, let's move on, please, come on.
One of the things I think we have learned from today, and some of us have agreed on, is the approach of many of our governments at the moment is wrong. Our governments in Europe still too much think, in the same way as Kissinger said about Europe, which number do I dial to get Europe? And our leaders still continue to think, which number do I dial to get the Muslims? This is the wrong way to think about it. You don't dial numbers to get communities. They are just simply part of Britain or Europe, as Daniel said at the outset. We should be faith-blind as we are colour-blind. But the problem is that when you have the most reactionary, the most bigoted people, the most loudmouth people stepping forward, this is a problem.
But I think this discussion today has shown that there is a very strong moderate voice, and people want to be heard and be part of this shared Europe. But Chris, floor's yours now.
There's so many points which have sort of come to be raised. We're talking about people being treated unfairly, we're talking about discrimination, and we're talking about a really contemporary phenomena. The Muslim communities are very, very different. We've got different social strata. We've got a very affluent, very well-educated middle class, Muslim middle class. But we've also got a very deprived, very sort of uneducated Muslim underclass as well in Birmingham. We've got Muslims from Eastern Europe. We've got Muslims from the Middle East. We've got Muslims from Africa. Some of the biggest tensions in Birmingham are between Somali Muslims and Pakistani Muslims, because the Somalis and the Pakistanis don't get on. Now, when we talk about Muslims, we're actually overlooking all those inherent differences which are in there. And so I think all the people here are here for who they are, not what they are. And I think that when we go down that route, and very much as Daniel said, when the government is actually paying Muslim organisations to go out and actually, sort of promote Muslimness and Islamness and promote Islam awareness, and sort of by suggesting that, if people are more informed about what Muslims do in a mosque, actually that will reduce Islamophobia, that will reduce discrimination, that will reduce prejudice. I think it's very misguided.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. I think you've summed it up rather well, thank you. And I think if we go away from this debate having come to that sort of common consensus, as it were, I think we'll have done something very constructive. But as I said, this is an ongoing discussion and we'll be back. Martin, I'd like you to have the floor now, please.
Thank you, Shada. I'm going to be very brief. I think the comment that goes to the heart of it for me is Petra's about people. I think this is about people, not about religions. It's about people, not about organizations. It's about people, not about communities and community leaders. I think we also need to understand quite how modern a phenomenon this is, and how modern a phenomenon the religious identification of a lot of opposition